And the IE Great Lakes region welcomes you to our monthly small group where we invite some of the best and brightest to come and bring us some new Ennea wisdom. And in fact, I'll get into introducing our guest presenter today, but one of the questions I asked Danielle Fanfair is, what's percolating with you right now? And she said, oh, I got some things percolating. So not that shocked me in any way, shape, or form. And so you'll get to hear some of the percolations today with our guest. But I'm going to share my screen with you and give you a little look at our newsletter. If you don't receive our newsletter, we would love to help you be a part of that. You can put your address in the chat or contact us at Great Lakes, Enneagram Great Lakes at gmail.com. I think that's right. I don't usually do this portion of the gathering, but I'll make sure by the end of the time and put it in the chat. So want to let you know that we have some online events happening, bi-weekly Enneagram group with Rosemary Hurwitz, a 3-part introduction to the Enneagram in March with Diana, and Enneagram Institute of Ohio has an Enneagram and Relationships workshop coming up. As always, we let you know what the accredited certification in your neighborhood is, and that includes the certification that I offer in the Enneagram Motions of the Soul, where we look at harmony. And then, of course, the revered Dr. Wagner, he has a spring session, a part 2 of Enneagram Spectrum coming up, and so you can check that out at enneagramspectrum.com. And then, of course, we always have Midday Cafe. We hope that in this new year, you get that added to your schedule, and that you will join us monthly whenever you can at lunchtime. So now take a look at this picture of this fine woman right here. This is our beloved Danielle Fanfair. And she is the founder of Confusion to Clarity curriculum and many other really important things that she's got going on these days that she'll tell us a little bit about. She is actually, drum roll please, she is the new co-president for the IEA Great Lakes, which means that Danielle is going to bring her harmony into my life and help me become more excellent in all my ways as she brings her leadership to this group, to our board, and to the region. So we want you to know that today she's going to be talking to us about some significant things about infusing our professional communication with awareness, empathy, compassion, and appreciation. I think one of the things that I always want to say about Danielle is she's always raising the bar for me. Not just because she is a 1, but because whether she's teaching Google business about the Enneagram or recently astronauts, she is always moving in a direction that takes our sights higher and helps us understand that our skills in the Enneagram have only seen a particular height on this day. And that by the end of this 50 minutes, I think that we're going to grow. We'll grow in all things Enneagram. So let's everybody welcome Danielle and just say, we're so grateful for your presence, our dear friend and now leader in our midst. So Danielle, tell us a little bit about what's percolating.
Hey, thank you so much. And, I want y'all to know that the Motions of the Soul professional training was my first ever certification program that I went through. I learned one-on-one and through various retreat experiences with Chris Hewarts, who is my first Enneagram teacher and who is my friend. And he said, hey, Clare and Scott Loughrige up in Marshall, Michigan have this training that I think would be a great beginning for you as you continue to grow as a global teacher of this Enneagram. And so I gathered my bags and went to that training. And not only was it transformative in how I saw the world, it was also transformative in my inner life and how I saw myself. And so, Claire, thank you so much. Scott, thank you so much for creating that safe place for me to learn and for continuing to invite me into opportunities to grow like this one. So,
Right.
so grateful, so excited. And man, I'm telling y'all, look, the Enneagram has been so helpful for me as I have been dealing with difficult people. Let's just be honest. The Enneagram is great when you're all in love and you're vibing and you have friendships and relationships and professional relationships that you have more insight on each other and you can giggle and laugh because you can anticipate each other's needs. That's great. Keep using it like that. However, the insights that I have to share with you today have largely come from me utilizing the Enneagram as a tool in bringing together wildly, polarly different points of views, mindsets, and habits that are completely unlike my own. And in de-escalating conflict that was really a real roadblock to productivity and progress in a lot of different environments. As Claire mentioned, I have had the pleasure of teaching the Enneagram and its various life-giving components to all kinds of businesses, from nonprofit organizations that support cancer survivors reorienting back into their bodies after chemo, all the way till Google and this last group of engineers that work within NASA. And actually had some folks in my class that had been to space. And I was like, tell me the truth. Is there somebody out there? And they were like, I only saw the people that were on my mission. And so I didn't get any intel there. Sorry for that. But what we were able to explore is, what does it look like to navigate difficult conversations, subject matter that is uncomfortable, and really move in a unified direction with people who don't seem like they're going to budge on their own belief system. And so I teach the Enneagram together with some practical, actionable steps towards creating psychologically safe spaces of belonging, spaces that are characterized by effective trust. And this has been really helpful for companies who have diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility challenges, and they want to create a new culture, and they want to do so in a way that's really meaningful and impactful and less performative. So that means they want to do more than just have support groups for people or Black History emails that go out, right? They want to actually have a shift in their culture that responds to the feedback that some of their most innovative, some of their highest producing employees don't feel safe where they work, right? So that's what I've been doing. And I also took a role. I love my real home is in event planning. I'm a retreat planner. I'm a workshop planner. I'm just a natural lived, learning experience planner. So I recently took a role as a program curator and a manager at a local park here in Houston. And in doing so, you have to, connect with so many different folks who want to rent the park, who want to use the park. You have to connect with consultants. So anyway, so what I'm learning in my utility of the Enneagram through all of these conversations that I'm having is that we have to remember, and I'm gonna share a screen with y'all. We have to remember what John Koenig coined as this concept called Sonder, right? And Sonder is this understanding or this belief, this sudden realization that everybody is experiencing an inner life that is just as vivid and as complex as your own, right? And so when we stop and think about it, here we go. I'm going to present. So when we think about this, everybody is having, these very complex interior dialogues with themselves, and probably their parent that they, learn from the most, every lesson that they've ever learned, every way that they've ever messed up, every way that they've ever succeeded and shined. We're all having these internal moments of realization. When I stop and really think about this, especially in a place like a park, I look around and everybody in the park is having their own experience, but everybody in the park is experiencing the exact same alarm, the exact same, everybody is counting their coughs and sneezes to make sure that they're not sick, right? Everybody is, doing all the things that most of us are doing to cope with this collective trauma that we're experiencing. Sonder, for me, is a way to really articulate the specifics of how we are more alike than we are different. And the Enneagram gives us an even more specific view of what that means and what that looks like. So when I'm talking to people, I do three things, actually. I remember three things. The first is I'll start to actively listen. Okay, I start to actively listen to these people. What are they saying in the conversation over and over again by either repetition, the jokes that they're making? What are some of the themes that are coming up in the conversation that I'm hearing over and over again, right? So for instance, when I'm talking to one person, I'm hearing them say things like, okay, I don't like surprises. I want to be sure that I know everything up front because I really don't like surprises. Okay. I listened to someone else talk about, okay, let's explore some what ifs, right? What if this happens? Or what if that happens? Or do we have any plans for this contingency, that contingency, right? Their questions are around possibilities of things going wrong or things not happening. Another person is talking specifically about how they feel about people and how people feel about them, right? So another person I've engaged with, they're constantly talking about the relationship and the vibe they get and their experience with people. Well, because now I have the Enneagram as a resource and as a guide, I can hear the person who doesn't want to, be surprised, who doesn't like surprises. I can hear the type 8, I don't want to be violated, core fear starting to come to the surface of the conversation, right? And I start to think, it's possible that I may be talking to someone who's either in an 8 growth or stress pattern or who is a type 8, right? All right. So the person who's constantly asking about covering the bases, what if this, what if that? Well, I just don't want this to happen, right? The person who's always going ahead to the future to think about eventual outcomes, that sounds a lot like either a type 6 who wants to feel secure, who needs support and guidance. It also may sound like a stressful type 7 who's constantly in planning mode and trying to get ahead of anything that may be going on, right? You now have some, through active listening, you have some clues to start putting together. But active listening means you have to quiet down on the inside in order to hear what other folks are saying. And then the person that I mentioned earlier who's talking about, vibe and energy and, emotions and describing how they, how the person that they're talking about comes across to them, or what was their emotional experience with them. Well, that person is focused more on the relationship than anything. So what type does that sound like? Y'all tell me. Yep, throw your fingers up. Yeah, Diane, I saw you. You got it right first. Type 2, right? Okay. So now that we are doing some active listening, and there are a few steps to active listening. The first thing that you do when you active listen is you simply listen. Then you begin to echo what the person is saying to let them know that you have actively interpreted what they're trying to convey to you, right? And then when we really make meaning of what we're actively listening to, then we have the information within us to respond, okay? So I want to share a screen with you again. All right, so, okay, okay. So these are just little diagrams that I share in my workshops. I'm sure all of y'all have some version of these that y'all share in your workshops. But we have so much information. Look at the core need and specific fears of these types. Type 1, they want to be good. They fear being bad. Type 2, they want to feel loved. They don't want to be unloved. Type 3, they want to feel valuable. They fear being worthless. Type 4, they really want to be themselves. They fear having no identity, no significance. Type 5, they want to be capable. They fear being helpless. Type 6, want that support and that guidance. Being without support and guidance is a huge fear for them. Type 7, they want to be satisfied. They fear being trapped in pain, deprivation. Type 8, they want to protect themselves. They fear being violated. Type 9, they want that peace of mind, that wholeness, and they fear that loss or separation. Well, keeping these few little phrases in mind can be so helpful in establishing a relationship of trust. We're now aware, and we're all trying to navigate and accomplish these things through our conversations, through how we are attracted to people, how we are avoidant or averting ourselves from different people in different subject matters. So people are telling you their type, they're telling you their strategies all day long. Our work is to listen, okay? And it's also helpful to remember the intelligence centers here. And remember that there's a head, the heart, and the gut group. That head group, they want that competency. If they don't feel competent, they're gonna go feel anxious and worried. That heart group, when they want that connection that they desire so bad and they don't get it, their feelings show up as a feeling of grief, loss that is rooted in shame. Why am I not enough to make this work? And then our gut people, we want control. We don't want to control you, but we want control over our environments. And when we don't have that control, we start to feel anger. We're now putting together some really interesting sifters for how we can interact with someone, okay? So now we've become more aware. Now that we understand what their core fears are, what their specific needs are, what's going on from a head, heart, and gut perspective, now we can begin to expand our empathy, because we all either want or have wanted these things, and we've all feared or been burnt by one of these things at some point in our lives. So now we can attach ourselves to what they're experiencing by putting ourselves in their shoes. And here's the thing about empathy. Empathy is not just feeling of an emotion that's related to what someone's experiencing. Empathy is saying, I can imagine your pain, I believe your pain, and I can feel it with you. That's what empathy says. Okay. Now, compassion sometimes is used interchangeably with empathy. However, compassion is more active. While empathy is more, I feel it with you, compassion says, not only do I feel it with you, but I'm going to take action within my power, within my capacity to reduce or relieve the suffering that I believe you're experiencing. So empathy says, oh my goodness, there are people outside and it's cold. I've been cold before, and we keep on driving. Compassion pulls over and says, do y'all want this blanket I got in the back of my car? It's not much, but it's better than being out here with nothing out in the cold. Compassion is active. And then lastly, appreciation is this recognizing and acknowledgement of the value that someone brings to the environment that they're in just by being who they are. In other words, appreciation is the verbal expression of why you believe in someone and why they contribute positive energy to any system just by showing up. It's not relative to what they've accomplished. It's not relative to quantifiable, achievements. It's just, this is what I believe is better or believe is in our environment because you just walked in. Okay. So ways to begin to infuse our professional communication is by taking into account each type's what I call the inherent knowing of the soul. Okay. So each personality type has core fears, has core specific needs, right? And each type has what has been called the lost childhood message. However, I think that lost childhood message, I've re-articulated that to mean this is what we came to this planet knowing, and then life intersected and experiences begin to disrupt this knowing and convince us that it may not be true. However, there's this part of our souls that knows that it is true. And this is the hack, y'all. When you're actively listening and you hear someone's core need come up, you hear their fears come up, you're starting to see those emotional go-tos that are related to their dominant intelligence center, or the intelligence center that they use first before they bring in the other two. You have all this information. You can infuse these messages into your communication with them on a professional level, and it will disarm and de-escalate any conflict, because this is the message that we're often using, even professional scenarios, to try and realize. Ones want to be good, especially at work. Twos go to work every day and they have their workload, and then they have the load of being connected to the people that they want to be connected to emotionally at their work. Threes are so driven by statistics and by, you know, the quantifiable measurements of what they can achieve. However, knowing that they are loved for being themselves is what they truly are trying to figure out. Fours, they want to be seen for who they are and accepted for that and not abandoned for that. Fives, they want to know that whatever they need to do and go and withdraw and think about and process and explore and come out and invent is not a problem. Sixes want to know that they're safe. All of these questions about what could possibly happen and these eventualities, and, you know, covering all the bases and constantly reviewing the vision of the authority that's in place. All of that is because they really feel like they should know this, but life is sending the messages that are interfering with the frequency of being safe. Type sevens want to know that they will be taken care of, and that any moment that does not feel good is temporary. It's not permanent. Eights want to make sure that they are not going to be blindsided by betrayal and violation. And nines want to know that their presence matters. It's so interesting. This happens at so many different learning experiences. However, when I was teaching my group of engineers from NASA last week, all the nines were as far back as possible, almost blending into the backgrounds, and all the eights were sitting on the front row because they wanted to make sure they were able to stop me as soon as I said something that they didn't like, right? And when I pointed that out, everybody just fell out laughing, right? And I was able to say, hey, type eights, I appreciate y'all being up here. However, I'm not going to tell you anything that does not equip you for a better experience in your workday, in your workflow, and with the people that you're with. Type nines, we want to hear what you have to say. And so I was taking the mic back there to them, mask on, taking the mic back there to them like I was Oprah in the crowd, right? Making sure that they knew that their contributions to our dialogue mattered. I wasn't letting anybody off the hook. And every time they spoke up, it was something revelatory that took everyone's experience into the account and pushed the conversation to a more expanded, more peaceful vibe, right? And so when we think about this, there are ways that we can make this language our own and communicate our intentions and make sure that our intentions and the impact of our decisions are always lined up with what we know is the inherent knowing, not only of our soul, but of the souls of the folks that we have. And so when I was talking with my type 8 colleague who didn't like surprises, I pulled the person to the side and said, hey, I want you to know that it's never my intention for you to hear something new that you have never heard of from me, right? And I pulled my type 6 colleague to the side and said, hey, I want us to make as big of a splash for good as possible by doing the least amount of stressing and working. She was like, I'm with it. Let's do it. Right. And so what it did was it really decreased the amount of back and forth in conversation. We were able to be more productive because that foundation of safety, of psychological safety, was created because I took these inherent knowings, made them my own from a language and linguistic standpoint, and made sure to communicate them in a way that my actions supported going forward. So I want to stop this share and I want to open up for questions, because a lot of times when we have these midday cafes, we do a lot of listening and it's always like drinking from a fire hydrant, right? However, in this time, I want us to take a few minutes just to dialogue about what's coming up. What questions do we have? What types are represented on this call, and what's coming up for you when you saw your inherent knowing?
Yeah. And Danielle, would you mind going back to share your screen with the one diagram you showed me before we started? I think that would be super helpful for people with the acceptance moving, right? The awareness all the way.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So show that, just take 1 minute on it. And maybe we can use that in the conversation as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Sorry about that, y'all.
Oh.
Okay. So what I've learned, and this is after observing the year of the Great Resignation, observing how 33 million people quit their jobs last year, y'all. And why? What was the standard reply when these folks were interviewed about why they left what appeared to be perfectly good jobs in search of something else? The overwhelming response was that I did not feel appreciated at my job. I did not feel like the hours that I was putting in, the work that I was doing, the deliverables, the ways that I was creating positive change, more revenue, you have it, you name it, whatever it is. I did not feel like that was being received and acknowledged in my experience with respectful behavior that took into the account the fullness of my humanity. And even in the cases where there were challenges around diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion, there were microaggressions and racist insults and all kinds of experiences related to someone's community and the historically excluded groups that they belong to. Even in those times, the thing that kept bubbling up is, I don't feel like they respect me as a human being and appreciate what I contribute. I'm just a member of this group to them. And so it's coming across in how they talk to me and how they don't talk to me, and my promotion path and how I'm being managed. All of these stereotypes and biases that these folks have in their minds is creating a one-size-fits-all approach to a person that looks like me or that is like me, that does not take into account the value that I bring to my organization or my company. So I don't feel appreciated. I have experienced this personally in several different areas of my professional career. And I realized that if we work backwards from appreciation, right? What happens is when we become aware, so many folks are just not aware. So many folks do not live or do life with people that are different from them frequently enough to be aware of what's happening in the world around them, right? And it wasn't until George Floyd was murdered by that police officer that awareness really hit an all-time high. And there were folks who were not even thinking about people like George Floyd who were talking about him every day. Okay. So that awareness, wow, there are other people having totally different lived experiences than me. Then that empathy, they're human. And I, as a human, can identify with the pain that they're experiencing, because in some form in my life, I have experienced that pain. So I can imagine and believe their pain. Then we move into compassion. Well, now what is within my power to do to begin to remedy this pain and reduce the suffering? And while we're being compassionate, compassion is a two-way street. So while we're acting compassionately towards other people, do you know that the little person in us that needs compassion also receives it? So compassion is a two-way street of healing, and we actually start to heal and restore ourselves when we're doing acts of compassion. There's a neurological cascade that begins to produce all of these positive neurotransmitters like dopamines and serotonin and oxytocin and endorphins. And those positive neurotransmitters help to repair places in our bodies that need to be repaired. They help us get better sleep. There's all of these physical functions that happen because of the cascade that starts in our brains when we're engaged in acts of compassion. And we start to learn that, wow, you have been going through all of this, the person that we're being compassionate towards, and you're still producing these deliverables. You're still behaving in a manner that goes above and beyond a standard of professional conduct. You have been able to absorb all of these overwhelmed moments and still contribute and make meaningful impacts. I really appreciate who you are and how your lived experiences have given you the capacity to still show up and deliver your talents and your gifts despite what you've been through. What happens as a result of getting to this place is that we are now communicating and behaving in ways that create psychological safety in our environments, and people are feeling more comfortable sharing their own ideas, taking personal risks, and experimenting in areas that could lead to creative innovation. They feel like they belong. These people want me and I want them. And they have a sense, a gut sense, which is what effective trust is, that I am safe and I will not be harmed. Well, look at that. Now we've covered the head, the heart, and the gut. You're now creating an environment where the entire person feels like they are completely able to show up as their best selves. And then this spot over here is blank because we don't know what's possible when we have a consistent environment of psychological safety, belonging, and effective trust. The skies are the limit. It's infinite possibilities when we feel this way. Any questions or comments about that that's coming up for you?
Well, you heard me say woohoo. Comment. I feel such hope, even considering how I can change my own way of relating to the other in the places where I live and eat and breathe and work. Because I even this idea of empathy and compassion, that little person, every one of us having gone through some significant either capital T trauma or lowercase t trauma over these days. Like, we are the walking wounded. Let's be clear, in one way or another. There are ways that people did not understand us. They were not aware of our own, and we're not aware of their pain. And so just this little movement with the arrows gives me this, I
had an engineer, a software engineer, tell me that he experimented with this actually at home. His wife had thrown out her back and she was not able to do the things that she typically does around the house. And he said, okay, I'm aware that her back is hurting. My back has hurt before, so I understand what she's going through. I'm going to be compassionate and ask her what I can do to help her, right? So she gave him a list of things that she typically gets done in a day. Now, what do y'all think happened after this man tried to do this list? Probably for the first time in his marriage. He had a lot of what?
Appreciation.
Appreciation. He was like, I had no idea what you do to keep our family moving forward, to keep this house running. He's like, I had no idea what it took and how well you do it. He was like, I have a new understanding of my wife's brilliance because I could not multitask and get all that done in one day. And she does effortlessly. He said, so I have so much more respect for my wife. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, look at that. Now, if only we could do that in our offices, we probably wouldn't have 33 million people saying they're not going to take it no more. We probably wouldn't be driving past our favorite restaurants and seeing signs that say, due to a staffing shortage, your wait will be now 2 hours, because we don't have compassion and appreciation for the people who are in the service industry. Right. And so there's all of these ways that this can come out. And in my workshop it's actually a day-long retreat that I lead. We talk about exactly what's happening in our brains, that as much as we know right now, when we have biases, and how we tend to allow our brains to create patterns that then form meaning and assumption about what's good and what's bad. And we default to those patterns on a daily basis. But when we engage in the exercises that expand our awareness, that grow who deserves our empathy, that gives us more ways to be compassionate and helps us to grow and expand how we demonstrate our appreciation, we don't have to lean to those brain defaults of bias and stereotype as much, because now we have real information about the people that are right in front of us. So we don't have to take a one size fits all approach to different people groups, because we can deal with the person that's in front of us because of all this information that we've collected through things like active listening, through our tool that the Enneagram provides us with. So the Enneagram is like a big old ring of fat flashlights. You know what I mean? It just flashes lights on so many different parts of our communication, our behavior, and our interactions with each other. And so I've discovered just this beautiful way that the Enneagram and understanding our personality types has really harmonized with the environments of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. Now they've added belonging, which I was like, hey, we already got that. And so those are some of the things that I teach in my courses, is how we can leverage personality as a way to really get beneath our skin, beneath our physical features, and deal with who we really are, right? And then leverage that for all kinds of success, all kinds of good doing, the expansion of our bottom line even, right? What other questions or insights do you all have? What's coming up for y'all?
Well, I would just like to comment that although I never was like in big industry, you know, or worked for a big corporation, unless you count the church,
The big old
that,
corporation.
yeah, that when I would listen to my friends talk about what they go through at work and the mismanagement, the terrible managers, the people who don't know how to be leaders, and what they put up with. And I'm thinking, well, for heaven's sakes, shouldn't they learn this when they're getting their MBAs? I mean, what are the business schools teaching? How, I thought all of that had been figured out. And I'm just amazed at the sloppy leadership.
Well, Diana, again, I think that there's a myth that one size fits all, and that if we can just kind of figure out business, then we can be the typical American go-getter, right? And we can just make what we want happen. But in the last 20 years, through the help of the Enneagram and people like Dr. David Daniels and even Daniel Goleman with the emotional intelligences, social and emotional intelligence has prevailed as just as important as intellectual capabilities and the ability to store and apply information. We all know geniuses who are not as successful or as satisfied as they could be because they don't know how to talk to people, and we're starting to see on a business and a political landscape the consequences of what happens when folks say, we understand your products are good, but you don't respect people, so we're not sending you our money, and so there's a great awakening that has been confirmed by the great resignation of 2021, that we really have an opportunity to create and cultivate these environments. And I'll tell you, when we engage in what's called a cost benefit analysis, and we actually run the costs, the benefits of engaging these components versus not engaging them, corporations get to see, even on a dollar level, how much paid employee time is being spent on recovery from disrespect, recovering from a lack of appreciation, moving forward when there's no empathy and compassion. All that money is spent on recovery that could be redirected towards creative innovation if they had these practices cemented in their culture, right?
Yeah.
And when they see that number, they're like, uh-oh.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is a good time for Wendy's question that she's put in the chat here. She said, what is the precursor to awareness? So many people are so absorbed or overwhelmed by their own circumstances that they are unaware of their own reality, let alone others. So do you have a precursor to awareness?
Yep. The precursor to awareness is conflict. The precursor to awareness is my daughter, my grandson, the people that I'm working with, I cannot seem to make it click with them. And I don't know why. I don't know what happened. That's the precursor. Because being in active conflict with someone, and we are the person that can't figure out where it's coming from, or what they're saying, or what they could mean, that means that our awareness is so centered on what's happening within us that it's like trying to talk to somebody next to a waterfall. The water is rushing and we can't, it's disrupting the communication flow, right? So the biggest thing that stimulated the awareness was when the ex-officer, I can't even remember his name, it's not important to me, killed George Floyd. And then we saw all of these young people leading a global protest. I'm down here in Houston. I was not getting out there and protesting because we was in the thick of COVID. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna protest in other ways. I'm not going out. But we saw all of these young people taking over downtown, taking over major city areas to show that they are presently protesting the blind eye that has been turned towards police brutality in this nation, right? That was a big conflict that raised all of our awareness. And the biggest question that I heard from all of my clients, my colleagues, members of my boards, all of this is, okay, we're aware. Now, where do we start? Because now we're starting to become aware of the interstructural ways that America has rigged itself against those who are, not in the dominant or the privileged class and for the privileged class, right? So where do I start? Because I'm seeing it everywhere now that I've opened my eyes because of this one conflict. So I would say, look at your conflicts.
Well, I have a question, Danielle. And I really don't mean for this to be confrontational. I'm curious. Yeah, we'll be confrontational later.
Come on.
When you use the phraseology, the domain of the soul, the inherent domain, the inherent knowing of the soul.
Inherent knowing of the soul. Mhm.
Okay. Do you run into people who react to the use of the soul in business situations?
No. What's interesting is whether you have a religious proclivity or not, there is still some sense of agreement that there's something that animates these limbs and the body that is not as cut, cut and dry as, we all want to think. There are folks who say, I don't believe in God, or I'm not a Christian, or I'm not, a religious person, but I think I have a soul. I think that there's a spirit in me that is bigger than my body. And so I have not yet encountered, even from a logical process oriented mathematical, software engineer, or, that kind of thing. I have not encountered pushback for that. What I have encountered pushback with is understanding the intelligence centers as brains. The triune brain theory in neuroscience has been debunked. And while the triune brain has been a great predecessor for, kind of evolving how we understand the brain, I've gotten a lot of pushback. And so I've had to re-articulate the intelligence centers in a way that does not come across as what was called pseudoscience in one of my labs. Yeah, they didn't like that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to show y'all one more screen because I create a workbook for each of my clients, and it's a custom workbook. And we go through, a lot of, depending on the length of the workshop, we are able to really cover, a lot of the kind of basics of how to understand Enneagram types, how the types dance together, how the types, kind of step on each other's toes on the dance floor, you know what I'm saying? However, this has been really helpful in understanding, what what each type is experiencing. I have these personality profiles, and what I really want to show you is the environmental needs of each personality type. And I always ask, what else would you add to these environmental needs? And so if you think about a type 1, this is type 1, and their needs, right? According to Richard Rohr, we look at the environmental needs, and this is data that I've collected across so many resources, including my own kind of observations and interviews. How are we supporting these environmental needs? How are we creating these environments, in our own space? And so if you look at type 2, theirs is completely different, right? They need regular expressions of love, that kind of thing. And so when we look at things like, ways to create these environments of awareness, empathy, compassion, and appreciation, the Enneagram is so helpful in realizing specifically what that looks like, right? And then layering all of the current day-to-day issues on top of that. For instance, what if you have a type 3 who is a young Latina woman, right? Who may seem like she's coming off as, off-putting or whatever, because she needs uninterrupted space to work hard, right? Like we afford that to men. We don't always afford that to women. So sometimes popping into each other's virtual offices or real offices, depending on our personality type, is either really helpful or it's not helpful, right? So how are we acknowledging how these nuances look on a daily basis, and it goes on and on. And there's also a little section about what each group, what each Enneagram type can look like in leadership positions and in relationships with those that they love, whatever relationship system that looks like, whether it's romantic, parental, friendship, whatever, wherever there's love, right? And so when we think about those types of, relationships, and we want to figure out where do we go from here, right? We think about, what if we know a Black woman who's a type 8, who can easily be stereotyped and cast off as a angry person, right? But there's so much information in the anger of the 8. What if we ourselves need to accept and create environments for ourselves? I know as a type 1, I have no problem telling my family, there is a spot in this house that y'all cannot touch. Leave my stuff alone. I like my stuff to be exactly, I don't care if it's a bunch of stack of papers that look haphazard. It's a method to the madness to me. Don't touch my stuff. You know what I'm saying? And because my husband understands my environmental needs, he goes, leave that alone. That's mommy's little stack. Let mommy get to it, right? So in summary, to recap, I know sometimes we can feel like we're drinking from a hose. The first thing to remember is our intelligence centers, right? What are the specific emotional needs? Competence, connection, and I'm pointing to my gut, control. Okay. And then thinking through the Enneagram's wisdom around what are the specific fears and core needs of the personality type that you're working with. They're going to tell you in the first 10 minutes of talking to them. They're going to let you know. So actively listening can help us to lock those in. And then what is the inherent knowing of their soul that we can help them remember that life has tried to lie and compete with the truth that they know inside.
Thank you, Danielle. I think that, the way that you're framing this up for us is just, I want to say, you not only have inspired us, but you've equipped us to be competent. And even though you're a control type, you're also a competency type. So then there's that.
The
And,
competency gives me more control. See, all the
well.
information gives me more control.
And I really appreciate the way you framed it. I loved Wendy's question about what's the precursor.
Mhm.
That was so helpful.
That was a great question.
Right. I loved Catherine's question about, can you use that word soul? Because in days gone by, you know, Catherine and I are old enough to remember when we were told in these settings, don't talk about the soul with business people. Like you can do that in the spiritual places, but be aware that that might not be a term that is as easily welcomed in some spaces. And I think what you're naming is that because we have named emotional intelligence as real intelligence in the business world, because we have, you know, even the three-legged stool Scott, what's the name of that great book? The Power of Full Engagement, where they talk about the three legs of the stool around high-level competitive athletes. And that it's not just physicality, it's not just, you know, their understanding or their skill, their ability to engage the structure of the games, but it's also their spirituality. And so naming it in ways that are not off-putting, so that we're saying this is how you will gain access. I also loved, I have to say, and you and I are going to have further conversation on this, but the debunked three brain method with our neuroscientists and what now has replaced it. I think that is that's another great conversation to have. Because it's not that, I love what Ginger Bogda says, and I'm sure many of us say it in similar ways. She always says, is it helpful or is it true? You know, it's kind of like parables. They may not be true, but they're helpful. They're stories, right? And there are parts of, even when, you know, back in the day when we were talking the three brains idea, and now we're actually understanding that the whole body is a brain. Okay, so what we realize is that all of these things that lead up to these things, they still are helpful to help open up a way to understand. And don't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater, but get, you know, to use the language that was used here. I'm not challenging you. I just am curious. I want to know a little more about that and how I can integrate not only the wisdom that came before this wisdom, but I can also honor those who understand in particular ways. And
well, just real quick, I actually sought the wisdom of Dr. Jerry Wagner on this because my feelings was hurt. And he's a 5. So I was like, come on, help me out. And his suggestion was for me to explore the neuroscience, the current neuroscience, and then phrase our thinking in and our heart and our gut centers as more metaphorical, and then come with the science that supports the metaphor. And so I've been able to grow, and I love science. I love neurobiology. I love cardiology. I love gut enterology. And so what I've been able to do is actually explore the science that backs up this triune way of being, and then present it as a metaphor that actually has beautiful symbolism, but then also hard scientific evidence that kind of aligns with it. And that lands better with my competent types.
That's right. And it's beautiful. And so with all of that, yes, we did. I told you it was going to be a master class. So we just want to say thank you and take a deep breath. And as you know, the functional neurobiologists say, breathe in to 4, out to 8, and take a swallow and go take on the rest of your day. Thanks for being here.
Thank y'all so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Awesome. Great questions.
Are you still here, Danielle?
I am.
Okay, you were talking about a workbook. Does it have some of the things that you were showing on your screens? Or
Yes.
is that for sale? Can I purchase that from you?
Yes, so I have a digital fillable PDF version that's for sale, and
Okay.
I'm a perfectionist that's recovering. So I'm working on a print version, and I can send you the link for the fillable version.
Okay, so if I send you an email,
Yes,
we can.
I get your emails anyway. So
I know. We're like best friends.
Oh yeah, you
Thank
have
you
a
so
little
much, Danielle.
VIP star that comes next to your email. So if you email me, I can send you the
Okay.
steps to get the fillable
Thank
one.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day. Have a
Too.
great life.
Thank
Go
you.
for it.
I'm doing the best I can. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, guys and gals. This went so fast. Well, thank y'all so much. I'll talk to y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.